Hey folks, this is Mike here with a slightly different video than usual. Instead of talking about games, I'm going to talk about unRAID, which is a operating system that you can install to create a file server, kind of like FreeNAS and some of those guys. But you can also do virtualization. So it's kind of like, not quite Proxmox, but you know, kind of a simpler version of that. So it's kind of a mix of the two, if you will. So yeah, the point of this video, well, first of all, I'm not done video in 2 weeks, so I could spin this up together real quick, put it out there, and hey, at least I've not gone on for 3 weeks without content. But actually, the whole point of this video is, spoiler, I'll tell you why this is worth the $60. It saves time. If your time is worth any money at all, at least for me, this thing pays for itself very quickly. In fact, it paid for itself already, because despite rebuilding my file server every year to try out new things and try and find that perfect ideal setup that I like, I still find myself spending a good 3 to 5 hours doing all the basic stuff every year with different operating systems. And this one here took me 15 minutes to set up everything plus more than I normally do. And I didn't read any documentation. I just did it just like that the first time. And in fact, the second time I set it up, it took me like 5 minutes. So there you go. It already paid for itself. That $60 is worth it. But let's go through, kind of give you an idea, what makes unRAID different than your standard RAID and why I prefer this over, say, FreeNAS and some of those things. First and foremost, this works very differently than your standard RAID. I've got a single parity disk for all these data drives. So this is a 3 terabyte parity, 2 terabyte data, and 2 500 gig data. If I were to actually build a standard RAID setup, I'd have to lose 1 terabyte of disk drive and do 3 2 terabytes in RAID 5. So this would give me 4 terabytes of storage because 2 terabytes would be used as a parity. And then these 2 drives I'd put in RAID 1 as a mirror. So I'd get 4.5 usable terabytes of storage. Now the thing is, with a traditional RAID, it's not the easiest to expand on. So that would be slightly annoying. It's also 2 separate arrays, and I don't really want separate arrays. I kind of want a unified array. So with this, well, your largest drive is your parity drive. After that, all your other drives are data drives. So you use 100% of all the other drives in your array, which is fantastic. So in this case, I have 2, 4, and then 5 terabytes of these 2 guys, as opposed to 4.5. The other thing unRAID does is I can very easily just plop in other drives, expand it, and it's not that much of a headache. It's super simple, very easy to do. The other nice thing is hard drive failures, right? I can lose more than 1 hard drive and I should be fine. Whereas if I lose 2 drives in an RAID 5 array, you're kind of screwed. The other thing too is this actually stores all the data on your drives. So in theory, even if I lost multiple drives, lost my parity in multiple drives, I should still be able to read the data on the remaining disks without any real issue. So a lot of pluses in that kind of setup. In many ways, it makes me think of a Drobo if you want your equivalent in high expensive NAS device. I'm saying it that way. They're not really. They're priced a little bit higher than your standard, QNAP Synology or whatever. But they have that advantage of being able to mix different sizes disks. It makes it easy to expand, and so on and so forth. Even though I've heard some questionable things here and there about them in terms of reliability and functionality, but hey, and all of these relatively inexpensive NASs seem to suffer the same issues. So at $60, this piece of software just needs an old PC and it works just as well, if not better. Actually, it works much better because of the virtual machine stuff, but we'll get into that in just a bit. So another interesting thing too is I've only got 3 drives live right now. I've got my parity, disk 2, and my caching drive. So I'm still copying data to the server, and because it's not striping across multiple drives, only these 2 drives are online. I'm not accessing anything on the other disks, so they all spin down, and they'll stay offline until they actually need to spin up, which is kind of cool. So another little plus. Whereas a standard array, all your drives have to be online. The instant you touch them. In this case, well, unless you're changing stuff, in theory, my parity doesn't even need to be online either. So, it is a nice little touch. It is a nice thing to do for hard drives, which honestly have limited lifespans. So smart status, we'll go over these real quick. This is something I used to manually check the smart report with SmartMon tools, I believe is the command line that this uses. The pre-filled are the important ones. More specifically, these 2, right? Your reallocated sector count and your error rate. These are the big ones, especially if you have errors there. But the other pre-fail ones are always kind of important to look at because they can signify old drives. In this case here, 354 hours, which is 14 days. This drive ain't gonna have problems anytime soon. It's a pretty young one. But on the flip side, these 2 terabytes, these guys have been going on for quite a while. This one's got 44,000. I believe the other one has 46,000 hours. But yeah, this is free NAS on those guys will also monitor your smart status. They'll throw up flags if they see something unusual. Like these 2 500 gig drives, they do have an error each. unRAID did throw up an error when it saw them. And the nice thing is you can acknowledge it, and unless that number goes up, it's not going to warn you again, which is, it sounds kind of silly, but the way I used to monitor the drives would always throw an error on my own solution because, well, it would never really remember the status. It would just say, hey, we found an error. And it would always be kind of going crazy about that. Despite those drives having that error for probably at least 5 years now. They've had that error for a long, long time. And they're still working fine. I've tested them multiple times and never had an issue. So, yeah, beyond that, very basic stuff here. Memory usage looks a bit high because I have 2 virtual machines taking over 4 gig total. So, the OS doesn't take that much. The OS does run from a USB drive. So, worth noting that you can very easily export back up the drive. So it's not that bad. But it doesn't really write to the drive much. Everything is in RAM. Unless you're doing configuration changes, there's no reason to write anything to your USB drive. So, cheap USB drive, it should work fine. Maybe not the most reliable, but beyond that, I'm not going to show the main tab. The main tab is where you configure your array. There's not much to see anyways, other than serial numbers, hence why I don't want to show it. But when you first set up the server, you choose your parity drive, which has to be the largest drive in your array. It needs to be the largest or the same size as, so if you have multiple 2 terabyte drives, that's fine. In my case, I just happen to have a 3 terabyte drive, so since it's the largest drive, it has to be my parity drive. But it could be the same size or equal. But yeah, you just say, hey, this is my parity, disk 1, 2, 3, 4, just check them all off. I have an SSD here, 60 gig SSD acting as a cache drive. Check that as well. This thing allows me to transfer files stupid fast, which is kind of cool. Because when I send files to the server, it caches them before moving them to the storage. And yeah, you click initialize array, it does that. After 30 seconds, it'll show you tell it to format. Then you're done. That's all you do on the main tab. I could do some changes from here, but like I said, serial numbers, so I'm not going to show it. Once you're done that, create your user. Creating a user is simple as give it a username and password. Not too much to see here. I don't know if there's a way to sync to like a directory server. Probably is, but I didn't bother looking. I'm using this at home anyway, so I don't really care all that much. In terms of shares, these are your standard shares except for this one. ISO is where you throw in your disk images for virtual machines and stuff. You can actually browse it too, which is kind of cool. But yeah, creating shares, super simple, super straightforward, right? Give it a name, comment, whatever, allocation method. All of these are clickable, so you can get info on what they do. So, it works. This is how it fills data. So at 50% the drive, and then the next drive, and next drive. So very nice way to allocate data, in my opinion. If you want to restrict or exclude certain hard drives as well, you could totally do that for shares. So if you have, say a share that's going to be used a lot by like servers and whatnot, you can specify, hey, use these faster drives. If you have shares that are just archiving and whatnot, tell it to use slower hard drives. So you can very easily manage stuff like that. It's just a single think of it as a big pool of storage, right? It's not necessarily a RAID array or anything like that. It's just a big pool. So in a lot of ways, it allows you to be really flexible, and you can still keep the redundancy. Which, as a side note, you could do double parity as well with this if you've got a lot of drives, which is always an important thing. I can also specify caching drive or not, copy on write or not. Yeah, SMB share, put that in. If I had AFP, NFS, and those things enabled, which is under settings. If I had these guys enabled, they'd show up there as well. AFP works great. Actually, when I first brought up my unRAID server, I had configured a time machine thing. It works really well. I could use this as a network time machine, so no problems with that. SMB settings as well for your Windows shares. FTP enabled with me. That's it. That's all I need. That's all I ever wanted. I know there's a lot of configurations and stuff. It is really straightforward to do. An FTP server normally with the configuration command line and all that. But this, I just need the basic settings. I don't need to change all that much. And yeah, I check the box and put my name in. Like that's all I want, which is really good. That's kind of the nice part about unRAID. It's been, I don't need anything fancy. But some of the fancier stuff like this, I've never bothered configuring a UPS before. I could totally put my UPS in here and have this thing auto shut down on me. I should probably do that one day. Except the UPS is plugged into a different PC, and that PC used to send a script to my old server to shut it down on my Windows PC because both of them are always on. So, hey, that's the kind of hacking stuff I used to do, right? Instead of bothering to configure it on the server itself. Yes, they share a UPS, which seems kind of silly, but it is what it is. But yeah, Docker. I should probably try and use that instead of virtual machines because a lot of these are just applications that can be put into a container. And in fact, this thing runs Docker within a VM, so I should have probably put it in a container already. But I'm using what I know. This works fine. I've got another 4 or 5 machines to spin up eventually because I like starting fresh. So some of these are, such as my VPN. It's not the same way I used to do it. In many ways, this is a much better solution than what I've used to do. So yeah, creating virtual machines, super simple. All the default settings are pretty much good as is. Depending how much CPU power you want to throw at it. if you have, where is it? Oh, I don't have any devices, I guess. But if you wanted to pass through PCIe device and stuff like that, you could totally do that. But I don't have anything here to pass through, unfortunately. Yeah, very straightforward. And that's the beauty of unRAID for me is at $60, it does everything I need, and it takes me no time to set it up. It's a lifetime license, and in fact, I brought open a tab here. Mind you, $60 is their basic, which is just 6 attached devices. As they say, the USB drive is not counted, but any hard drive and SSD used in an array, mind you, you can have more drives plugged in but not in use. But anything used in an array, including your caching SSD, that also counts towards the limit of 6. That's what you're paying for, right? 12 devices is $90, and unlimited is $130. So yeah, there's a limit, but this is a I think this is more of a hard limit of the operating system itself than them actually limiting you to 30 devices. But with that said, if ever you're like me and you're just going to buy the 6 devices because that's all I can really fit in that case, but in the future, since this is a lifetime license, if in the future I get myself a nicer case with more room, I can also go to pricing here and just buy the upgrade. So it's the price difference plus $10. I'm not really going to complain about that. I'm not going to go out and buy the other license up front because I'm not going to need it until next year, maybe the year after. And so if I really like it, I'll probably just pay for the upgrade eventually. But yeah, that's unRAID. Kind of a quick overview, I suppose. Not too technical, but yeah, it's fantastic. Also, mind you, if you saw this parity check, I could have easily not. When you first set it up, you don't need to do the parity check because if you have no data on your drives and you just set them up, you can just check the box and say assume the parity is okay because hey, it'll do the parity as you're copying data, right? So there's no point in really going through the initialization process. But despite that, I still did it. It still averaged at 36 megasecond, which is pretty good since I was copying data to the server the whole time I was doing it at about 90 megasecond or so. So that's very close to the throughput limit of these hard drives. Anyway, there you have it. That's kind of unRAID in a nutshell, really. Like I said, it's a bit of a different video than usual, but I've been spending a bit of time last weekend and this weekend working on this, and I might have another video on my fractal design case because, yeah, I want to talk about that thing because I've used a lot of cases, and I spent last weekend rebuilding my PC back into that case to make room for my server stuff, and it made me realize actually that case is a really, really well made case. There's a lot of great, nice design things that they've done, which just shows you don't have to spend a lot of money for a really good case, and you can also spend a lot of money for a really terrible case, which is my server case. So, anyways, unfortunately, it's not a fractal design case because I would have been really happy with it, but I decided to buy something else, and well. Hence why I want to do a video on that fractal design case to go over some of the cool design things they've done. But that's it. We'll end it here before I lose my voice, and I'll see you guys hopefully next week with another video.